The chamber stretched for miles in every direction, a vast circular space that could hold representatives from 847 different species without anyone feeling crowded. The walls glowed with soft bioluminescence, courtesy of the Luminara, who had designed Consensus Prime 300,000 years ago when the first Galactic Federation was formed. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the human delegation box, a small platform that hovered near the outer edge of the Great Circle, far from the center, where the elder species maintained their positions of honor. She had known this day was coming. The signs had been there for months. The cold responses to human trade proposals, the sudden cancellations of joint research projects, the way other species ambassadors would find excuses to leave when humans entered a room. Still, knowing something is coming and experiencing it are two very different things. The speaker of the conclave rose from the central dais. Their form shifted and changed as they spoke, adapting to be visible to all the different types of vision present in the chamber. It was the critic hive mind today. Thousands of small crystalline beings moving in perfect synchronization to create the illusion of a single massive entity. "We gather to address the human question," the speaker announced, their voice translating instantly into hundreds of languages through quantum entanglement. For 50 cycles since first contact, the species known as humanity has been granted provisional membership in our Federation. In that time, they have demonstrated behaviors that concern this assembly. Elena kept her face neutral. She had been a diplomat for 20 years, had negotiated treaties and trade agreements across a dozen worlds, but nothing had prepared her for this. Around her, the representatives of nearly 1,000 species waited in silence. The first witness approached, a tall, ethereal being from the Seraphim, collective, beings of pure energy who had been exploring the galaxy when Earth was still cooling from its formation. "Humanity expands too quickly," the Seraphim representative testified. "They do not wait for proper surveys or Federation approval. They see a world and claim it. We have records of humans settling 17 worlds classified as uninhabitable. They terraform without permission, alter ecosystems without oversight, and refuse to follow established colonization protocols." Next came a delegate from the Architects, an ancient species of silicon-based lifeforms. "Humans ask too many questions," the Architects said, their voice like grinding stones. "They request access to technologies they are not ready for. They want to know how everything works, not content to simply use what we provide. They demand schematics, formulae, the underlying principles of our gifts. This is not how younger species should behave." One by one, the testimonies continued. Sphere complained that human music was chaotic and disturbing to their collective consciousness. The Traders Guild presented evidence that humans had begun developing their own FTL technologies, instead of purchasing approved drives from authorized dealers. The Medical Consortium expressed horror at human genetic experiments that violated 17 different Federation bioethics treaties. Elena listened to it all, taking notes on her tablet. She noticed patterns in the complaints. Humans were too aggressive, too curious, too independent, too creative, too unwilling to accept the natural order of things. The subtext was clear. Humans refused to know their place. The critic speaker moved to the center of the circle. "We must also address the matter of human entertainment," they said, and Elena almost laughed, despite the gravity of the situation. "Human broadcasts have reached 47 Federation worlds. The content is disturbing, shows depicting violence, chaos, interpersonal conflict, and irrational decision-making presented as entertainment. The psychological impact on younger species is concerning. Our own collective spent 3 cycles processing a program called reality television and still does not understand its purpose." That was when Elena realized just how different humans were from the rest of the galaxy. These ancient species had created a civilization of order, stability, and careful hierarchy maintained over hundreds of thousands of years. Humanity had arrived like a hurricane, all chaos and energy and relentless forward momentum. They didn't understand humans, and that frightened them. The final testimony came from the Federation Security Council. A massive being that looked like mobile stone presented classified intelligence reports. Humanity has been reverse engineering Federation technology, they declared. They have been conducting unauthorized research into restricted fields. They have developed weapon systems. Without approval, they represent a potential security threat to the established order. Elena felt anger flare in her chest. Security threat? Humans had fought in 3 Federation conflicts, had shed blood defending worlds that weren't their own, had contributed more in 50 years than some species had in millennia. But she kept her expression calm. The speaker called for the vote. The process took hours, as each species registered their decision. Elena watched the display above the central dais as the count climbed. In the end, it wasn't even close. 691 species voted for expulsion. 83 abstained. Only 73 voted against the ban. Most of those were younger species, ones who had found common ground with humanity. The vote is decided, the speaker announced. Effective immediately, humanity is expelled from the Galactic Federation. All trade agreements are terminated. All technology-sharing treaties are void. All joint ventures must be dissolved within 6 Earth months. Human vessels will no longer have access to Federation space lanes. Human colonies in jointly administered space must be evacuated. The species known as humanity is hereby banned from all Federation worlds, stations, and territories. The chamber erupted in a mixture of what Elena assumed were expressions of approval from the majority and concern from the minority. She stood there, feeling the weight of representing an entire species in this moment. 847 species had just collectively decided that humans didn't belong. The speaker turned toward the human delegation box. Ambassador Vasquez, do you wish to address this assembly? Elena considered her options. She could plead humanity's case, could beg for reconsideration, could promise that humans would change their ways. That's what they expected, what they wanted, proof that humans needed the Federation, that they couldn't survive without this ancient institution. Instead, she simply said, "Understood." She gathered her materials, disconnected her translation device, and began walking toward the exit. The exit. What do you have to say? The speaker called after her. There was confusion in their voice. This wasn't following the expected script. Elena stopped and turned back. What would you like me to say? You've made your decision. We respect it. Humanity will comply with all terms of the expulsion. We'll be out of your space within the time frame specified. She paused, then added, Thank you for the opportunity to have been part of this Federation. We learned a lot. She left the chamber, and behind her, she could hear the confused murmuring of hundreds of species trying to understand why the humans weren't panicking. They had expected begging, pleading, perhaps even threats. What they got was calm acceptance and a polite thank you. As Elena walked down the long corridor toward the human section of Consensus Prime, she allowed herself a small smile. The Federation thought they were punishing humanity. They thought humans would collapse without their guidance and protection. They had no idea what they had just done. They had freed humanity from the chains they didn't even know they were wearing. And that, Elena thought, was going to change everything. The news reached Earth 6 hours after Ambassador Vasquez left Consensus Prime, thanks to quantum communication arrays that humans had built themselves, despite Federation recommendations against it. Within minutes, every screen on the planet displayed the same breaking news. Humanity expelled from Galactic Federation. The initial reaction was exactly what one might expect. Stock markets crashed, social media erupted. News anchors spoke in grave tones about isolation and economic collapse. Politicians called emergency sessions. Religious leaders offered prayers, and millions of ordinary people looked up at the stars and wondered what this meant for their future. Then something remarkable happened. The panic lasted exactly 6 hours and 42 minutes. After that, humanity did what it always did when faced with a crisis. They rolled up their sleeves and got to work. The Emergency Council convened in Geneva, but this wasn't the usual bureaucratic nightmare. International politics. Every major power on Earth sent their best people. Colony administrators joined via holoconference from 100 different worlds. Corporate leaders, military commanders, scientific directors, and civilian representatives all gathered with one simple question. What do we do now? Director Sarah Mitchell from the Mars Terraforming Authority spoke first. Let's inventory what we're losing, she said, pulling up holographic displays. Federation trade gave us access to certain luxury goods, exotic foods, entertainment, some high-end medical equipment. We imported some rare elements because it was cheaper than mining them ourselves. We had access to their databases and their established trade routes. General Carlos Rodriguez added his assessment. We also lose their protection. Not that it was ever worth much. The Federation's idea of military defense is stern diplomatic letters. But still, we were technically under their security umbrella. James Chen, Earth's leading physicist, stood up. His gray hair was messy and his clothes rumpled. He had clearly rushed to the meeting from his laboratory. May I point out what we're not losing? He asked. We're not losing any critical technology. Do you know why? Because the Federation never gave us any. The room went quiet. Everyone knew it, but no one had said it so bluntly. Look at what they shared with us, Chen continued, warming to his subject. FTL drives, but not the principles behind them. Just the finished product. Gravity plating, but not the underlying physics. Medical treatments, but not the research that developed them. Advanced materials, but not the manufacturing processes. They gave us fish, but refused to teach us how to fish. I think they did it on purpose. Ambassador Vasquez, who had returned to Earth immediately after the vote, nodded in agreement. Every time we asked for deeper knowledge, for the actual science behind their technologies, they told us we weren't ready, that we needed to prove ourselves first, that such knowledge was restricted to species with more maturity. She smiled grimly. What they really meant was they wanted to keep us dependent. The head of the Asian Economic Coalition spoke up. So what are you proposing? I'm proposing we stop trying to be part of their club, Chen said. We reverse engineer everything we have from them. We develop our own technologies based on our own principles. We do things the human way instead of trying to fit into their mold. That could take decades, someone objected. So, Chen shot back, what else are we going to do? Sit around and wait for them to change their minds? Hope they'll take us back if we promise to behave? The debate raged for hours, but gradually a consensus emerged. Humanity would go its own way. They would build their own network of trade and communication, develop their own technologies, and create their own future. The Federation wanted them out. Fine. They were out. Within 2 weeks, the orders went out to every human colony, world, and station in known space. Federation liaisons were to be politely but firmly escorted to neutral territory. Joint ventures were to be dissolved or bought out entirely. Any Federation technology was to be catalogued and either returned or kept for study. And most importantly, all Federation surveillance equipment was to be located and shut down. The last part proved interesting. Once they actually looked for it, humans found monitoring devices everywhere. In their ships, their stations, their government buildings, even in some private facilities. The Federation had been watching everything. Colony Administrator Marcus Webb on Proxima Station summarized the general feeling when he found 17 hidden sensors in the station's command center. They really didn't trust us at all, he said. Good. Now, we don't have to trust them, either. Then expected. Yes, Certain luxury goods vanished from the markets, but human manufacturers stepped in to fill the gaps. Yes, some rare elements became more expensive, but mining operations expanded rapidly. The loss of Federation trade routes meant humans had to establish their own, which they did with characteristic efficiency. What surprised everyone was how quickly human innovation accelerated once the Federation's restrictions were removed. Scientists who had been frustrated by limits on their research suddenly had freedom to explore. Engineers who had been told certain approaches were not approved could now experiment. Companies that had been constrained by Federation trade regulations could now operate however they wanted. Dr. Chen's team at the Advanced Physics Laboratory made the first major breakthrough. They had been studying the FTL drives that humans had purchased from the Federation, trying to understand the underlying principles. Lifted and no more worried looks from Federation overseers. They tore the drives apart and actually figured out how they worked. "It's brilliant," Chen explained at a press conference 3 months after the ban, "but it's also incredibly conservative. The Federation's FTL technology is designed to be safe, stable, and predictable. It's perfect for a civilization that values order above all else. But we can do better." 6 months later, human engineers unveiled the first truly human-designed FTL drive. It was faster than Federation models, cheaper to produce, and yes, slightly less stable. Federation observers who heard about it through back channels described it as reckless and unnecessarily dangerous. Human pilots called it perfect. The pattern repeated across every field of technology. Artificial intelligence, which the Federation had banned as too dangerous. Human researchers developed AI systems that were cooperative, creative, and incredibly useful. Genetic modification, which violated Federation bioethics treaties. Human doctors used it to cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Aggressive terraforming techniques that the Federation considered ecological warfare. Human colonies used them to make 17 uninhabitable death traps into thriving worlds. Not everything went smoothly. There were failures, accidents, and setbacks. But humans learned from each mistake and kept pushing forward. The Federation's careful, conservative approach had maintained stability for hundreds of thousands of years. The human approach was chaotic, risky, and advancing at a pace that would have terrified the elder species. A year after the ban, Ambassador Vasquez stood in her office overlooking Geneva and reviewed the reports from across human space. 127 colonies, all thriving. Dozens of new research initiatives, all making progress. A completely human-controlled economy, growing stronger every quarter. And perhaps most importantly, a population that was no longer constrained, looking to the Federation for validation or approval. Her assistant brought in the latest intelligence report from their contacts in Federation space. "You should read this," he said. The report detailed confusion among Federation observers. They had expected humanity to collapse, to fragment, to come begging for readmission. Instead, human space was consolidating, growing stronger, and showing no interest whatsoever in galactic politics. "There's something else," her assistant added. 3 younger species have sent quiet inquiries asking how we did it. They want to know if it's possible to leave the Federation and survive. Vasquez smiled. That was something the Federation should be worried about. For hundreds of thousands of years, they had maintained control through a simple principle. Species needed them more than they needed any individual species. Humanity had just proven that principle wrong. She looked out at the city below, at the ships launching. From the nearby spaceport, at the construction drones building new orbital facilities. Humanity had been kicked out of the Galactic Club, and instead of disaster, they had found freedom. And, "Let them watch," she said quietly. "Let them see what happens when you stop asking for permission and start building your own future." 15 years had passed since the ban, and the Galactic Federation had largely stopped thinking about humanity. Oh, there were occasional intelligence reports filed by independent traders who passed through neutral space, But most Federation officials assumed the human problem had solved itself through natural collapse. Younger species without proper guidance always failed eventually. It was simply the way of things. Ambassador Takri of the Harmonious Assembly reviewed the latest reports with growing confusion. She was relatively young for a Federation diplomat, only 3,000 years old, and she had been assigned to monitor the former human territories as a low-priority task. What she was reading didn't make sense. "This must be wrong," she said to her assistant. "These numbers cannot be accurate." Her assistant, a floating orb of condensed thought energy from the contemplation spheres, pulsed uncertainly. "I have verified the data 17 times, Ambassador. Independent traders, automated monitoring stations, and even some of our own long-range sensors confirm it. Human space is not collapsing. It is expanding." Takri pulled up the holographic display. What had been 127 human colonies 15 years ago was now 203. Human ships were moving through space at speeds that exceeded Federation safety recommendations. Human stations appeared in locations that had been deemed unsuitable for habitation. And most disturbing of all, human economic activity was off the charts. "How?" Takri asked. "They lost access to our trade networks, our technology, our guidance. They should be struggling just to maintain what they have, not expanding." "Perhaps we should investigate further," her assistant suggested. Takri filed a request for a deeper analysis, but it was denied. The Federation Council had more important matters to attend to than a banned species that was no longer their concern. She did something unusual for a Federation diplomat. She started digging on her own. She contacted independent traders who had actually visited human space. The first few were reluctant to talk, but eventually she found one willing to share information. Captain Zextar, a four-armed merchant from a neutral species that traded with everyone. "You want to know about human space?" Zextar said, their translator struggling with what might have been laughter. "It's insane. Wonderful, but absolutely insane." "Explain," Takri demanded. "They're building things the Federation said were impossible," Zextar continued. "I stopped at a place called Mars, which is apparently their shipbuilding center now. Ambassador, they're producing vessels at a rate that would make the architects jealous. And the ships themselves, they're fast, really fast. Unstable according to Federation standards, sure, but they work." "What else?" "I visited a colony on a world called Europa, underwater cities. Can you imagine? The Federation classified that moon as uninhabitable, but humans are living there, thousands of them. They've developed technologies for underwater habitation that I've never seen anywhere else in the galaxy." Takri's investigation continued. She learned about the Belt, a region of asteroid colonies that were stripping resources with frightening efficiency. About genetic modifications that would violate a dozen Federation treaties, but which had apparently eliminated most human diseases. About AI systems that were not only functional, but creative in ways that made Federation programmers nervous. "They're doing everything wrong," Takri reported to her supervisor. "They're ignoring safety protocols, violating ethical guidelines, and pursuing research in fields that we've banned for good reasons. And yet somehow, they're thriving." Her supervisor, an ancient being from one of the elder species, was unconcerned. "Let them play with fire," they said, "themselves eventually. Young species always do when they lack proper guidance." But Takri wasn't so sure. She had seen the data. Human space wasn't just surviving. It was evolving into something completely different from the Federation. Something that didn't follow any of the established patterns. On Mars, Chief Engineer Rebecca Stone stood in the observation deck of the primary shipyard, watching as another vessel rolled out of construction. This one was destined for the outer colonies, a hybrid design that combined cargo capacity with defensive capabilities that would have made Federation observers very uncomfortable. "How many is that this month?" her assistant asked. 47, Rebecca replied. and we're just getting started. The shipyards stretched for hundreds of kilometers around Mars, using resources from the belt and designs that evolved almost daily. There was no central planning authority dictating how ships should be built. Instead, different facilities competed and collaborated, sharing successful innovations and discarding failures. It was chaotic, messy, and incredibly effective. Communicator chimed. It was a call from Europa Station. "Rebecca, you need to see this," her colleague Dr. Lisa Park said. "We've had another breakthrough in adaptive biology." The holographic display showed something remarkable. The underwater cities of Europa had been struggling with the psychological effects of living in eternal darkness beneath kilometers of ice. Human bodies weren't designed for such environments, so human scientists had done something the Federation would have considered unthinkable. They modified themselves. "We're not changing what makes us human," Lisa explained. "We're just adapting to our environment. Better low-light vision, improved pressure tolerance, enhanced metabolism for cold environments." The colonists volunteered, and the results are incredible. Rebecca shook her head in wonder. The Federation would lose their minds if they knew. "The Federation isn't here," Lisa pointed out. "That's kind of the point." Philosophy had become central to human development over the past 15 years. Without the Federation's restrictions, humans were free to innovate in ways that would have been impossible before. Some experiments failed. Some failed spectacularly. But enough succeeded that human technology was diverging rapidly from galactic norms. On Earth, the capital of human space, Secretary General David Morrison reviewed economic reports with satisfaction. The transition away from Federation trade had been rocky at first, but human commerce had adapted. New trade routes connected human colonies in networks that were redundant, flexible, and efficient in ways that the orderly Federation routes could never be. "We're getting inquiries from non-Federation species," his economic advisor reported. "They want to establish trade agreements with us." "How many?" 43 species so far. Most of them are small, independent civilizations that the Federation never bothered with. They're interested in our technology, especially our FTL drives and AI systems. Morrison considered this carefully. "Open negotiations with all of them. But make sure they understand we're not looking to build another Federation. We're interested in partnerships between equals, not hierarchies." The advisor nodded and left. Morrison turned to the window, looking out at the orbital elevators that now connected Earth to its ring of stations. It had taken 10 years to build them, using human-developed materials and human-designed construction methods. The Federation had said such structures were unnecessary and inefficient, but they allowed for cheap, reliable access to orbit, and that had transformed Earth's economy. His communicator buzzed. It was Admiral Chen, the son of the physicist who had helped lead humanity's technological revolution. "Mr. Secretary, we have an interesting situation." "Report." "Long-range sensors detected a Federation observation post near the border of our space. They're watching us. Have been for about 6 months, based on the orbital data." Morrison smiled. "Let them watch. What are they going to see?" "A civilization that's thriving without them," Admiral Chen replied. "Think they're starting to regret the ban?" "I don't know," Morrison admitted. "But I know we're not going back. Whatever they're thinking, whatever they're planning, humanity has moved on." Back on Consensus Prime, Ambassador Takri finally compiled her full report on human space. It had taken her 2 years of careful investigation, correlation of data from dozens of sources, and analysis that her superiors had not authorized. What she had discovered was disturbing enough that she bypassed normal channels and requested an emergency session of the Federation Council. She stood before the Assembly of Elder Species, the same chamber where humanity had been expelled 17 years earlier. Began. "I bring urgent information about the human situation." "The humans are not our concern," one of the elder species responded. "They were banned. They are beyond our jurisdiction. That is precisely the problem, Takri said, activating her holographic displays. Human space now encompasses 203 colonies. They have developed technologies that rival or exceed our own in several fields. They have established trade relationships with 43 independent species, and most concerning, they show absolutely no interest in returning to the Federation. The chamber erupted in confusion. This was not how things were supposed to work. Banned species were supposed to decline, fragment, and eventually either collapse or beg for readmission. They were not supposed to thrive. This is unacceptable, another elder species declared. A younger species cannot simply reject the Federation and succeed. It sets a dangerous precedent. Another section of her report. It gets worse. We've detected inquiries from 3 Federation member species, younger civilizations asking questions about how humanity achieved independence. They're wondering if they need the Federation at all. The chamber went silent. That was the real danger. For hundreds of thousands of years, the Federation had maintained order through a careful balance of benefits and dependencies. Species joined because they needed access to galactic trade, technology, and protection. If humanity proved that a species could thrive outside the Federation, the entire system could begin to unravel. "What do you recommend?" the speaker asked. Takri took a deep breath. "I recommend we lift the ban and invite humanity to return to the Federation." "Why would they accept?" someone asked. "I don't think they would," Takri admitted, "but we need to try, because if we don't, we may find that the Federation no longer controls the future of this." Galaxy Arc. The warning came through every communication channel the Galactic Federation possessed. A massive fleet had entered known space from the galactic rim, moving with purpose and speed that suggested hostile intent. The Devourers had returned. The Devourers were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were harvesters, a nomadic civilization that moved from region to region, stripping worlds of resources before moving on. They appeared every few thousand years, took what they wanted, and disappeared back into the depths of space. The Federation's response had always been the same: negotiate territory, make concessions, and wait for them to leave. Senior Coordinator Melvas of the Federation Security Council reviewed the Devourer fleet's projected path with growing concern. The route would take them through 17 Federation worlds before reaching the edge of explored space. All 17 worlds had already received evacuation orders, developed over thousands of years of Devourer encounters. Then Melvas noticed something that made his blood run cold, or whatever equivalent his species experienced. The Devourer fleet's path didn't end at Federation space. It continued directly into human territory, specifically toward a cluster of 17 human colonies. "We need to warn them," Melvas told his staff. "The humans are not Federation members," his assistant reminded him. "We have no obligation to warn them." "But we have an opportunity to observe," another officer suggested. "The humans claim to have developed significant military capabilities. This will be a chance to verify those claims." Melvas overruled them. "Send a warning through neutral channels. Inform them of the Devourer fleet's path and our assessment of the threat. It's the right thing to do." The message went out through independent traders, who still maintained contact with human space. The Devourers were coming. Federation could not and would not provide protection to non-member worlds. Humanity should evacuate immediately. The response came back 2 days later. 2 words in simple text: "We're good." "What does that mean?" Melvas demanded. "Do they not understand the threat? The Devourers have been harvesting worlds for millions of years. They have technology older than most Federation species. They have never been defeated in combat, only negotiated with." His assistant pulled up the analysis. "Based on linguistic patterns, we believe 'we're good' is a human expression meaning they are adequately prepared and do not require assistance. "That's insane," Melvas said. "They're going to fight?" "It appears so." Against his better judgment, Melvas positioned long-range monitoring satellites near human space. If the humans were going to make a stand against the Devourers, the Federation needed to know what happened. The information could be valuable. And secretly, despite his professionalism, Melvas was curious. Humans had been full of surprises since they first made contact. What would they do when faced with an enemy that had never lost? The Devourers arrived at the first human colony exactly on schedule. The world was called New Phoenix, a rocky planet that humans had terraformed over 12 years using methods the Federation considered aggressive and risky. It was home to 2 million humans and served as a manufacturing hub for the outer colonies. The Devourer fleet consisted of 47 massive harvester ships, each one capable of landing on a world and extracting its resources over a period of months. They were supported by hundreds of smaller vessels for defense and logistics. It was a standard Devourer harvest fleet, unstoppable by any conventional military force. What they found at New Phoenix was not conventional. The first indication that something was different came when the Devourer Vanguard entered the system and immediately detected over 1,000 autonomous defense platforms. These platforms did not match any known Federation design. They were smaller, faster, and appeared to be AI-controlled, which the Federation had banned decades ago for safety reasons. Platforms opened fire without warning. No attempt at communication, no demand for surrender, just immediate, overwhelming violence. The weapons themselves were unusual. Kinetic accelerators that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds, missiles that seemed to predict and counter evasive maneuvers, and some kind of directed energy weapon that the monitoring satellites couldn't identify. 3 Devourer escort ships were destroyed in the first volley. On the command ship of the Devourer fleet, Harvester Prime reviewed the data with what might have been surprise. "The locals are resisting," it communicated to the rest of the fleet. "This is unexpected, but ultimately irrelevant. Proceed with harvest protocols." The Devourer fleet advanced, and that's when the real defense began. Human warships emerged from concealment behind New Phoenix's 2 moons. There were 37 ships in total, ranging from small corvettes to massive battlecruisers that rivaled Devourer. Vessels in size. They looked wrong to Federation observers, cobbled together from a dozen incompatible technologies, bristling with weapons that violated several arms control treaties. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded the human fleet from the battlecruiser Indomitable. "All ships, weapons free," she ordered. "Show them what happens when you mess with a human colony." The battle that followed was unlike anything the Federation had ever seen. Human tactics were aggressive to the point of recklessness. Ships moved at speeds that should have torn them apart, executing maneuvers that would have killed any crew experiencing normal acceleration. But humans had apparently solved the inertial dampening problem in ways the Federation had never considered. The weapons were worse. Humans used kinetic strikes, yes, but they also employed weaponized asteroids, missiles that seemed to violate causality, and swarms of AI-controlled drones that attacked with frightening coordination. Human Destroyer sacrificed itself by ramming a Devourer harvester ship at near light speed, the resulting explosion destroying both vessels and damaging 3 others. Harvester Prime watched as 2 more of its ships were destroyed, then 3 more. The human vessels were taking damage as well, but they kept fighting with a ferocity that the Devourers had not encountered in millennia of harvesting operations. These were not the orderly defensive tactics of Federation species. This was warfare as chaos, creativity applied to destruction. "Withdraw," Harvester Prime ordered. "This harvest is not cost-effective." The Devourer fleet retreated, leaving behind 12 destroyed harvester ships and 31 escort vessels. It was the first time in recorded history that the Devourers had been driven off by military force rather than negotiation. On New Phoenix, Admiral Chen surveyed the damage. Her fleet had lost 9 ships and taken heavy damage to 14 others. The colony was intact, the people were safe, and they had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. In Federation space, Melvas reviewed the sensor recordings in stunned silence. "They won," he said quietly. "The humans actually won." "The humans fought with extreme prejudice," his military analyst reported. "They employed tactics and weapons that violate 17 different Federation military protocols. They demonstrated a capacity for violence that far exceeds what we believed younger species capable of." "What is their overall military strength?" Melvas asked. The analyst's expression was grim. "Based on what we observed, and extrapolating from the resources available in human space, we estimate they could field a fleet comparable to any of the elder species, possibly larger. And their willingness to accept casualties and risk in pursuit of victory means they might be more effective in actual combat, despite having less advanced." Melvas felt the implications settle over him, like a weight. For 30 years, the Federation had assumed that banned humanity would wither, would fade into insignificance. Instead, they had built a military that could stand against threats the Federation had never defeated, only managed. "There's something else," the analyst continued. "After the battle, human ships were observed claiming salvage from the devourer vessels. They're going to study the technology, reverse engineer it, add it to their own capabilities." "Of course they are," Melvas said. "That's what humans do." News of the Battle of New Phoenix spread quickly through Federation space, despite attempts to classify the information. Independent traders talked, junior officers gossiped, and soon every species in the galaxy knew that humans had done what the Federation never had: defeated the Devourers in open combat. The reaction was mixed. Some species were impressed, frightened. A few were angry that humans had succeeded where the Federation had failed. But the younger species, the ones who had never quite fit into the Federation's ancient hierarchies, asked a different question. If humans could do that on their own, what did they really need the Federation for? On Earth, Secretary General Morrison received Admiral Chen's after-action report. "Losses?" he asked. "Acceptable," Chen replied. "We knew there would be casualties. The crews knew the risks. Every person on those ships volunteered to defend their fellow humans. The Federation is going to be concerned." "Let them be concerned," Chen said. "We didn't ask for this fight, but we finished it. And now everyone knows that human space is not free territory. You want to harvest our worlds? You're going to pay a price that makes it not worth the effort." Morrison nodded. "There's political fallout to consider. Some species are calling us warmongers. Others are saying we're destabilizing the Galactic Order." "We're not part of the Galactic Order," Shen reminded him. "They kicked us out, remember? We don't answer to them anymore." "No," Morrison agreed. "We don't, but we need to be smart about this. The Federation is going to react. We just proved that we're strong enough to be a threat. That's going to scare some people." "Good," Chen said. "Fear breeds respect, and respect means they'll think twice before bothering us again." Back on Consensus Prime, the Federation Council convened an emergency session for the second time in 30 years to discuss humanity. Ambassador Takri stood before them once again, vindicated in her warnings, but taking no pleasure in it. "The human question can no longer be ignored," she told the assembled species. "They have demonstrated military capabilities that match or exceed our own. They have survived and thrived without Federation support. They have established themselves as an independent power in this galaxy. We must decide how to respond." The debate raged for days. Some advocated for military action, arguing that humanity needed to be brought under control before they became a greater threat. Others pushed for diplomacy, suggesting that the ban should be lifted and humans invited back into the Federation. A few suggested simply leaving humans alone and hoping they would remain content in their own space. In the end, the Council reached a decision. Send a diplomatic delegation to human space. Offer to lift the ban. Invite humanity back into the Federation with full membership and unprecedented benefits. It was the only logical choice. The alternative was having a powerful, independent civilization right on their borders, answering to no one and following no rules but their own. The question that no one wanted to ask was simple. Why would humanity accept? 50 years after the ban, Liberty 7 orbital station hung above Earth like a massive crown. It was the largest structure humanity had ever built, stretching 40 kilometers in diameter, and serving as the political, economic, and cultural heart of human space. Ships from 100 different colonies came and went every hour, and the station's population of 3 million made it one of the busiest hubs in known space. Secretary General Maria Santos stood in her office, watching the construction drones working on the newest expansion. She was 74 years old, had been leading the United Human Republics for 12 years, and had spent her entire adult life watching humanity grow into something the galaxy had never seen before. Her assistant entered, looking slightly nervous. "Madam Secretary, the Federation delegation has arrived." Maria nodded. She had been expecting this. After the Battle of New Phoenix and humanity's subsequent expansion, it had only been a matter of time before the Federation tried to bring humans back into the fold. How many in their delegation? 17 representatives, one from each of the major Federation councils, led by Ambassador Takri of the Harmonious Assembly. "I remember reading about her," Maria said. "She was one of the few who tried to warn the Federation about us. Show them to Conference Room 1. I'll be there shortly." Maria took a moment to review the briefing materials. The Federation had spent 50 years largely ignoring humanity, and humans had used that time to build something remarkable. Human space now encompassed 312 colonies across 47 star systems. The population had grown to 93 billion, spread across worlds that range from garden paradises to industrial hellscapes that humans had learned to thrive in anyway. More importantly, humanity had established trade relationships with 68 independent species, civilizations that the Federation had never bothered with because they were too small, too remote, or too different to fit into the established order. These species had found in humanity a partner willing to trade as equals, share technology freely, and respect their independence. The human economy was larger than 12 Federation member species combined. Human technology had diverged so far from galactic norms that Federation scientists struggled to even understand it. And perhaps most significantly, humanity had demonstrated that a species could not only survive outside the Federation, but thrive in ways that the ancient institution never allowed. Maria made her way to the conference room. The Federation delegation was already seated, looking uncomfortable in chairs designed for human proportions. Ambassador Takri rose when Maria entered, her crystalline form shifting to approximate a human gesture of respect. "Secretary General Santos," Takri said, "agreeing to meet with us." "Of course," Maria replied, taking her seat. "We may not be part of the Federation anymore, but we believe in maintaining diplomatic relationships with all civilizations. What can I do for you?" Takri activated a holographic display. "I will be direct. The Galactic Federation Council has voted to lift the ban on humanity. You are hereby invited to rejoin the Federation with full membership status. We are prepared to offer unprecedented benefits, immediate access to all Federation trade routes, full technology sharing without restrictions, seats on 7 major councils, and a voice in galactic governance equal to species that have been members for millennia." Maria listened carefully. It was a generous offer, possibly the most generous the Federation had ever made to any species, which meant they were either genuinely impressed with humanity or genuinely frightened. Probably both. "I appreciate the offer," Maria said, "and I'm sure many people will be pleased to hear that the ban is lifted. But I need to be honest with you, Ambassador. I don't think humanity is interested in rejoining the Federation. The Federation delegates reacted with visible surprise. This was clearly not the response they had expected. I don't understand, Takri said. We are offering you everything. Access, technology, political power, protection. What more could you want? Freedom, Maria replied simply. The freedom to develop our own technologies without someone telling us what's too dangerous to pursue. The freedom to establish our own trade relationships without bureaucratic approval. The freedom to govern ourselves without submitting to ancient hierarchies that don't reflect our values. We've had that freedom for 50 years now, and we're not eager to give it up. One of the other delegates, a massive stone-like being from the architects, spoke up. You cannot be serious. Humanity is strong, yes, but you are still a young species. You need the guidance and wisdom of elder civilizations. You need the stability that Federation membership provides. Maria smiled. Do we? In the 50 years since you banned us, we've expanded to over 300 colonies. We've developed technologies you told us were impossible. We've defeated threats you only know how to negotiate with. We've built an economy that's thriving, a military that's respected, and a civilization that's happy. What exactly do we need the Federation for? You need our protection, another delegate insisted. From what? Maria asked. The Devourers? We beat them. Pirates? We handle them ourselves. Economic collapse? Our economy is stronger than ever. The only threat the Federation protects species from is independence. And that's exactly what we don't need protection from. The room fell silent. Takri looked at Maria with what might have been respect. You've thought about this carefully, he said. We've had 50 years to think about it, Maria said. Look, I understand why you're here. You're worried that humanity's success outside the Federation sets a dangerous precedent. You're concerned that other species might look at us and wonder why they need Federation membership. And you're right to be concerned, because those are excellent questions. So you refuse our offer? Takri asked. Not entirely, Maria said. We're not interested in Federation membership, but we are interested in diplomatic relations. We're happy to establish embassies, negotiate trade agreements, and work together on common challenges. We're even willing to share some of our technology and research. We'll be as equals, not as members subject to your rules and restrictions. One of the elder species delegates stood up, clearly angry. This is unacceptable. The Federation has maintained order in this galaxy for hundreds of thousands of years. We cannot simply let species opt out whenever they please. Why not? Maria asked. The Federation was supposed to be about cooperation and mutual benefit, not control. If species are only members because they have no choice, then you're not a Federation, you're an empire, and empires eventually fall. The delegate glared at her but sat back down. Takri raised a hand for calm. Secretary General, I understand your position, but I must ask you to consider the broader implications. If every species followed humanity's example, the Federation would collapse. The order and stability we've maintained would be lost. Maybe that order needs to be lost, Maria said gently. The Federation was built by ancient species for ancient species. It works for civilizations that value stability over innovation, hierarchy over equality, order over freedom. But it doesn't work for everyone, and trying to force every species to fit that mold is why you're having these problems. What do you propose? Takri asked. I propose that the Federation evolves, Maria said. Stop requiring complete submission from member species. Allow different levels of participation. Some species might want full membership with all the rules and restrictions. Others might prefer associate status with more independence. Create a system that's actually flexible enough to accommodate different civilizations with different values. That would be a fundamental change to how the Federation operates, Takri said. Yes, it would, Maria agreed. But consider the alternative. Right now, you have one species that's proven you can thrive outside the Federation. How long before others try? How long before your younger members start asking why they're following rules made by civilizations that haven't had a new idea in 100,000 years? Change now, voluntarily, or watch your Federation slowly fragment as species realize they don't need you. The delegation conferred among themselves for several minutes. Finally, Takri turned back to Maria. I will bring your proposal to the Council. I cannot promise they will accept it. The elder species are not fond of change. I know, Maria said, but whether they change or not, humanity is going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to keep expanding, innovating, and building relationships with other species. We're not trying to destroy the Federation. We're just not interested in being part of it on your terms. If you can accept that, then I think we can have a positive relationship. If not, she shrugged, we'll still be fine. After the delegation left, Maria's chief of staff came into the office. Do you think they'll actually reform the Federation? He asked. Probably not, Maria admitted, or at least not quickly enough to matter. Species have been running things their way for so long that they can't imagine any other approach. But maybe some of the younger species will push for change. Maybe a few will even follow our example and strike out on their own. And if the Federation decides we're a threat and takes military action? Maria walked to the window, looking out at the ships moving around Liberty 7. Then they'll learn the same lesson the Devourers did. Humans don't back down from fights, we win them. But I don't think it will come to that. The Federation isn't stupid. They know that attacking us would be costly, and they know it would prove everything we've been saying about them. 3 months later, Maria received a message from Takri. The Federation Council had rejected the proposal to reform, but they had agreed to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. They would not offer membership again, but they would respect human independence and negotiate trade agreements on a case-by-case basis. It was as close to an admission of defeat as the Federation was capable of making. Over the following years, 3 younger Federation species quietly withdrew their membership and established independent governments modeled partly on human structures. The Federation protested, but took no action. The precedent had been set, and there was no going back. Humanity continued to expand, not through conquest, but through cooperation with other independent species. They built networks of trade, shared technology freely with those who asked, and maintained a military strong enough to ensure no one thought humans were easy targets. They never rejoined the Federation, and after a while, no one expected them to. On her last day in office, Maria Santos stood once more in her office on Liberty 7, watching the ships come and go. Her successor was being sworn in down the hall, and Maria was looking forward to retirement. She had spent her entire career helping humanity navigate its independence, and now she could rest knowing that independence was secure. Her communicator chimed one last time. It was a message from a newly independent species that had just left the Federation, asking for advice on how to build a stable government outside the established order. Maria smiled and began composing her reply. The galaxy was changing, slowly but inevitably, and it had all started because one species had been kicked out of the club and decided they didn't need to be part of it anyway. The Federation had meant to punish humanity, to make an example of them, to show what happened to species that didn't fall in line. Instead, they had freed humanity to become something greater than they ever could have been within the Federation's constraints. And that, Maria thought as she sent her message, was the best revenge of all. Not fighting the system, not destroying it, but simply proving you didn't need it, and thriving without. Outside her window, a colony ship was preparing for departure, heading to humanity's 400th world. The child who would be born there would grow up never knowing a time when humans asked permission from anyone. They would look at the stars and see nothing but possibility, unlimited by ancient rules or outdated hierarchies. That child would be truly free, and so would all of humanity, forever unbothered by a galaxy that had tried to define their limits and failed.